think this is not how a team works, how a club works. Like if you are part of a team, you cannot just say, "Oh, I take myself out of here." I eat with you and I get all the benefits that we get as a team, but I don't want to contribute anything. And so I think here we as the European Union and all the other countries, we have to really beef up and show more teeth, because in the end, solidarity is what keeps us together in the European Union, and it's what will kind of be reflected outside as well. And the only reason why the European borders at this point are unhumane, and it's absolutely tragic to see what is happening at our European borders, in my opinion, the only reason for that is a lack of solidarity and a lack of being strong together,
Hi, and welcome to Mind the Shift, a podcast about a shifting world and shifting minds. My name is Anders Bolling. There are doctors without borders, reporters without borders, teachers without borders, engineers without borders, so why not voters without borders? I have long wondered why the campaigns for the elections to the European Parliament still are so nationally centered, when the whole point is to solve common problems and to look beyond the nation state. The EU is a unique and in many ways wonderful attempt to move us away from suffocating nationalism, a project which is as enormously large as it is underestimated, I think. Then I discovered Volt. My guest today is Valerie Sternberg, co-president of Volt, founded 3 years ago as the first pan-European party, creating politics for a federal Europe across European borders. Welcome to the show, Valerie.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are German, but you have also studied in Italy, and you have studied in the United Kingdom, and you have worked in Belgium. So you really qualify as a true pan-European, don't you?
Yeah, I think I truly represent the Erasmus generation, and I'm really lucky to have had the opportunities to study abroad in Europe, and have a good time during traineeships and really experience a lot of culture and European language that we have to offer on this continent.
Yeah, great. So when people ask you, what do you define yourself as? Do you say, "Yeah, oh, I'm German," or "I'm European," or maybe something else?
I think if I truly look inside me, I identify mostly as a European, but also as being from the area where I grew up, which is near Frankfurt am Main in the center of Germany. So I would identify as a Hessian and as a European. However, to be honest, when I am abroad and I'm asked where are you from, I say I am German, because for some reason this seems to still be the categories that we and everyone thinks of, and that what actually we are interested in, and so there's this clash.
I know, yeah, I have the same experience, but I'm from Sweden, but I don't want to be defined as a Swedish person. I want to be defined as a human being, as myself, of course, but then it's a fact that I've grown up in Sweden. So, but people have so many connotations around nation states and nationalities, don't they? It's a problem.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I find that by having had the opportunity due to Erasmus, and also obviously being a child of Schengen, so having not really had experienced the European internal borders, I feel like I really had the opportunity to discover Europe's diversity and also discover more about myself. So really, I'm such a I'm very passionate about the Italian language, and I sometimes feel like, why was I not born as Italian? Because I really feel so home in this language, but also there's so many other parts. So while
you speak fluent Italian?
I did. I feel like I'm a bit rusty after 5 years of using it less, but yes, I did.
Great. Well, your English is excellent, so you're polyglot or multilingual anyway, which is very suiting for your what you're doing now. Okay, so let's dive a bit into this big project of yours, Volt. It was founded in 2017, right?
Yes, right after the Brexit
Yeah.
referendum.
Okay, so how large has it grown, this Europe-wide party grown so far, if you have any definitions of it?
Sure. So we are represented in over 20 countries in Europe. That obviously, I mean, it varies where, because sometimes teams are very small, for example, in the Baltic countries, but we are really represented in the north, in the south, in the east, and in the west. We have now 16 registered national parties, because, as you know, you cannot just be a European party. You have to be able, to be able to run for elections, you have to register as national parties, and we have around 300 city teams, which is really how we organize ourselves locally and then European.
Okay, yeah, well, that's the thing, that you have to, in order to start a party that wants to run for the European elections, it has to be national. It's a paradox.
Absolutely, and it doesn't only have to be national, but there's actually all these differences in in electoral requirements of how you're able to run for elections, and then how many votes you actually need to enter the European Parliament. So, for example, while in Germany we had to be actually an we had to register as a political party. In the Netherlands, we didn't. While we had to collect 4,000 signatures in Germany, we had to collect 150,000 in Italy. And also we didn't have to register as a party in Italy. We had to register as a party in the Netherlands. But like, there are so many differences in party laws which actually apply at the national level, but also apply for the European elections, which was a huge hurdle, and which is something that you're not aware of. We actually entered the European Parliament coming from the German side, so with 0.7% of the vote in Germany, we were able to enter the Parliament. In the Netherlands, we got triple the percentage of that.
As many, yeah.
Yeah. And we didn't enter. So you can see, it's, there's a lot of challenges that need to be tackled in order to have a true European representation.
Yeah, but so Volt has now one representative in the European Parliament.
Yes, exactly. Damien Böselager now represents us in the European Parliament. We ran back then in 8 European countries. Were successful in Germany. We had 500,000 votes across Europe, and we can really proudly say, I think, now that he's the first member of the European Parliament who really represents a European movement and party.
Okay, so maybe I should have asked this before this question, but anyway, let's go back a little bit to where you started working for this project. It started in 2017, and you were one of the first persons working with it, creating this project, I understand. And you had an aha moment that made you decide to join Volt. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I had just finished my master's, and I was basically, I guess, like everyone else, starting to looking for a job and working on my applications. But finishing my master's, the Brexit referendum basically happened, and I was shocked. So it actually happened while I was studying in Bath in England, and I was visiting my family over the weekend, and I went to bed when on the I guess it was a Sunday or so when it happened, when the referendum was held, and I woke up the next morning to catch a flight from Frankfurt to London, and I woke up with a push notification saying your flight was cancelled, and a push notification saying Britain is going to leave the EU. And I was really shell-shocked, because I had just turned off my phone and not even expected the results of the referendum, because I was so sure that they were just going to stay in the EU.
Yeah.
So I think this was an aha moment for me that I had to do something, but I really did not have a clue at all what that was. And then a few months later, a friend of mine forwarded me a really a website where there was not much on, but the name Volt, and with the mission to create the first pan-European party and movement in Europe, and kind of, and then a little bit more detail to that, and that kind of really appealed to me, and I just jumped in.
Great, yeah. So Brexit was the trigger.
Brexit was absolutely the trigger, and I think it was the trigger for all the people that were part of the founding team and who were really organizing themselves across, or started to organize themselves across Europe, and were part of that initial.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a shocker, wasn't it? I mean, even for me and for so many people, of course, when Brexit happened, you couldn't really believe it. It was, and I think I said at the time, well, later that year, of course, Trump won the elections in the United States, and everybody has been talking about Brexit and Trump, and Trump as if those are two events that changed the politics of the world, changed the situation in the Western world. Which they did, of course. But I said at the time that I think Brexit is worse than Trump, because Trump is only there for 4 or maybe 8 years, but Brexit is forever. I'm not sure how that's going to go, actually, but let's come back to that later. It's really interesting what's happening in the United Kingdom or these negotiations between the UK and the EU. So Volt started, and Volt grew, and Volt is now a force, which is still a bit small, but it's growing, and it's really fascinating that you exist. I think it's in my view very commendable. So maybe you can explain a little bit more to us what the party stands for. It says on the website that Volt is progressive and pragmatic. So that sounds sympathetic in my ears and many others person's ears, perhaps. But to many, it may seem a bit contradictory. Can you explain what does that mean, progressive and pragmatic?
Sure. So first of all, we believe that only Europe that acts together can solve our shared challenges. We really believe in empowering people to change politics and unlock Europe's potential together. And I think this is the progressive part of our identity. We want a Europe that provides equal opportunities for everyone, that goes beyond sustainability, where we are not just looking into sustainably exploiting or using our resources, but where we are looking and also giving something back to our planet. And we really believe in everyone's potential. And believes that we need to enable everyone to make something of themselves, to achieve their own individual goods, but also to enable them to be part of shaping the larger common good. And I think this is, actually potentially part of our vision. And I guess this is what we mean with being progressive. We mean that we need a vision. We need to be future oriented. We need to give each other the tools that we need to stand up for, or to be able to survive in a future world. Pragmatic means that we want to know who we are. We really work hard on finding our values and our principles and on our vision for the future. But we are equally, let's say, aware that you probably sometimes have to make sacrifices, and that democracy lives out of consensus, and that democracy lives out of conversation and compromise and finding a middle ground. And I think this is the pragmatic part of it. So yes, we need to identify when do we want to basically push our head through the wall, because the principle that we stand up for is so important that we just need to do it. But in the end, most of the time, democracy lives off conversation and the narrative that is being fed into the kind of society and politics, and this is the pragmatic part of us.
Yeah. Okay. When you describe your progressive part, you sound a little bit like the Green parties in a way. Do you think would you place your party on the left-right scale or on the gal-tan scale? You know, this other scale that is, I don't know if that's the abbreviation in English actually, but on the scale between maybe the green liberal side and the more traditional conservative side, there are two scales. You know, the traditional left-right and the more modern other kind of scale. Would you place your party on any of those scales, or is it completely free of the old ideologies?
Great question. We really try to free ourselves from the old ideologies. So we might be talking about this a little bit later on, but we somehow believe that because we're still stuck in old ideologies and we're still stuck in kind of the old party lines, kind of the employee and employer divide and green, anti-green, that's really where politics is stuck, and therefore it doesn't manage to think anymore ahead and create kind of an environment that gets us ready for the future. And so I think we want to go beyond that, and we stand for a mix of being a movement, so actually living a new identity, but also really drawing new lines. And I think here a lot plays into, what are the trends of tomorrow? The trends are climate change and migration that will really have a huge impact on us as European societies and obviously the rest of the world. So how do we tackle that? Do we tackle that together, or do we tackle that alone? So it's potentially more a internationalist and isolationist approach. I think I'll stop here for now.
Yeah. Okay. What does it stand for, Volt? I didn't ask that before.
It's just a creative name. We wanted something that is sort of equally pronounced across European countries or in all the different languages, and then we wanted not just an abbreviation because we thought that was rather boring, and we wanted something that we thought, energizes. And with Volt, everyone thinks like of energy.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess that's Volt is a good word if you want everyone in Europe be able to pronounce it in more or less the same way, as opposed to the currency the euro, which is pronounced in different ways. But that's inevitable, of course. But it's funny in the country where I live. I shouldn't say my country. The country where I live, Sweden. People have a tendency of anglifying things, so they they actually pronounce the currency euro. Not everyone, but most people, I think, would say euro instead of euro or evro, which would be more natural for Sweden. Yeah, it's really interesting. And
in German, it's euro. Yeah.
Euro, yeah, it's euro, and in Spain and Italy, it's euro, and in France, it's euro. Mm-hmm. But Swedes say euro. I don't know why. It's because they're so impressed with English, maybe. There's only 4 million people in the euro area who actually speak English. It's the Irish. Everyone else speaks some other language. Anyway, that's a sidetrack. You have 6 core goals, don't you? 6 basic goals that, well, at least on the website, Volt's website, you can find 6 goals.
The 5+1 challenges. Is this what you?
Maybe it is. I don't know. I call them goals here, but maybe you call them challenges. You can walk us through them one by one. I have them here. The first one is smart state. So if you just briefly can explain.
Absolutely. So when we were founded, and I think this is very interesting, which also there, like the thought process is a different one, I think, than I guess most parties now in the political systems in Europe probably emerged after the Second World War, maybe a little bit later, there was some reform. We tried to completely free ourselves here from, let's say, how other parties do it. Also because obviously Europe is so diverse that references are very diverse as well. But we really tried to think in future challenges. What are the challenges that unite us across Europe that we need to tackle, and where we need to define shared goals while leaving room for the specific kind of the situation in each country where that is special, that is different across countries, where we also potentially need to have, an array of answers rather than having the one truth. But we are all kind of buying into the same goal. So Smart State was born out of the idea that our administration is across Europe not where it should be.
Okay.
So it's sorry, I just need a sip of glass.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's really born out of the idea that education and digitization come way too short. Our public administrations aren't as digital as they could be and should be, and by that are way less efficient and transparent and accessible for most people as they should be. So this is a large pillar of Smart State. Education as well, because we think education is super fundamental for society, obviously, and for the future. And currently our educative systems obviously vary a lot, but and I guess especially the Scandinavian countries are generally really praised of their very good education systems. However, we think that to be able to be ready for the future, a lot still has to change. For example, soft skills should have the same level as hard skills. We don't just need to know hard facts, but we need to know how to learn. We need to actually get to know ourselves. We need to be able to reinvent ourselves and everything around us, so we are ready for a future that might look so different in 50 years than what we can even imagine now. And this is the tools that we should be giving our kids. So yeah, this is kind of an education revolution and digitization of public administration. Economic renaissance.
Yeah, that's number 2, economic renaissance.
Yes, second challenge. There is a lot in there. It's a lot about innovation, and also there we, it surrounds around 2 key goals. So on the one hand, we say, let's leave no one behind. Let's create a social welfare system that ensures that no one is left behind, and that kind of everyone has equal opportunities in Europe. On the other hand, let's be innovative, and for innovation we need entrepreneurs. So let's make it very easy to be entrepreneurs. Let's create a one-stop shop, for example, to set up a company and reduce administration, which, for example, if you look at Germany, is crazy. I don't know about Sweden, but here it really takes a long time. Sorry, I have a really dry throat today.
Yes. Please have a sip of water. No problem. So less hassle when you start companies.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So innovation while also creating a baseline for an equal society. Social equality has been a very important part for us. It's the third challenge. It's about saying no to discrimination, any form, and going beyond that, creating a society that is totally equal, where it doesn't matter which gender or income or religion or origin you're from.
Yeah. Well, it goes very well together with parts of the economic renaissance that you were talking about.
Yes, and and we do really think that an equal society in the end is the absolute baseline for to have a society that is able to grow and where everyone has, even people that do have privileges in the end are not as well off when the weakest part of society is not well off. So we can all be stronger if everyone has the same chances and opportunities. Global balance is our fourth challenge, and it is what I've been talking about earlier. It's actually about the global challenges that we are facing, whether migration or climate change, and really saying Europe needs to take responsibility proactively, actively, on world stage, and ideally find global solutions, and if that's not possible, at least European, and then potentially find cooperation outside.
Is that those two issues the ones that you want to focus on under that challenge, migration and climate change, or are you also talking about other kinds of global challenges like poverty, eradicating poverty and things like that, and enhancing health worldwide? Or is that not part of what you're?
Yeah, that would be part of it too. What is kind of the role of Europe in making the world a better place as well. Although you can also find that a little bit in our +1 or our 6th challenge, which is EU reform. So how can we create a Europe that takes responsibility outside of the EU? And okay, so our 5th challenge is citizen empowerment, and here it is really about empowering people to become part of politics, to make them feel like, and not only feel, but to actually give them a voice and to actually empower them to become active in politics. So in a sense, it is about creating a more participatory democracy, whether it be through citizen councils or through other means. That is the concrete proposal. And here, the last challenge.
Have the +1, yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's called the +1 EU Reform Challenge because for the other challenges we defined shared goals, but all of these chapters are nationally applied. So they're nationally derived in a way that they can be adapted to the national circumstances. And obviously there we have a big variety of political systems and economic systems and whatever. So we need to see how it fits. And so there our policy proposals can be adapted while buying into the same goal. EU reform is unchangeable. It's the same chapter across all our European chapters.
Okay, yeah.
And this challenge is really very technical, actually. While the vision is one that we don't see the EU as an end in itself. We think that we are big believers in the EU because we think it's the best vehicle, the best means to achieve our vision of the society that we kind of would like to create. And we think that the EU has been a great project that has ensured peace for over 70 years now, where all the past generations have put significant amount of energy and time and thought into to create this project of collaboration, of shared values and principles, or coming to consensus of what these are and how they should be promoted. And rather than destroying the whole project while recognizing the flaws it has, we think that we need to tackle the flaws and make it better than it is now. And this is what is behind EU reform. So it goes from, for example, a specific topic would be really reforming the European Council. Why is the most powerful body in the European Union the national heads of state and government, when we actually have elected representatives that are sitting in the European Parliament that are directly voted by us.
And of course, obviously, you need the EU to reform the ways that people vote for the European Parliament, so that we can have pan-European parties.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to dive deeper into that. So, I mean, yes, absolutely, we need to change the way the electoral elections are organized, and the electoral requirements are harmonized across the EU. We need to change its institutions and make them truly representative, and change them in a way that it's not a haggling of national interests at the EU level, where the strongest representative of a state or government wins, but it's about putting on a truly European lens and not a national, and coming to, maybe differently put, what is currently happening. We have our national representatives that come together at the European level, that represent the national interests, and then try to find the minimum consensus. We think it can be much bigger than that if we put on a European lens, and we come to an understanding. Okay, what is best for everyone, for kind of a European public sphere, for our European society, because then it's not only the minimal consensus.
Yeah. Well, that's the crunch problem, the big issue with the whole European Union system, which is run by nation states. But there have been so many EU reforms over the years, as you know. The European Constitution. Well, it's not called a constitution, but the what's the word for it? I forgot.
The treaty.
In English. The treaty. Sorry, yeah, the treaty, the European Union Treaty, has been changed many times. But in your eyes, it hasn't been changed in the right direction, then, or?
At least not ambitiously enough, and I think it's completely clear, because currently, still, we legitimize the European project to function via our national representatives. But to make it truly democratic, we need to reform it in a way that the European citizens have the say in what direction it takes.
There's a lot of talk these days about a renewed nationalism, not only in Europe, but not least in Europe. Do you think that the citizens of Europe are ready to start feeling more European than, say, French, Polish, Swedish, or Portuguese?
I think it's a process. I think there is readiness there, but in the end, it's a process that you need. In order to identify with something, you need to know what with, and for that you need an image, and you need to have a shared vision, a shared narrative with people, a sense of belonging. And I think this is actually one of the major problems of the European Union, that we don't have a leadership that provides us with a narrative and a vision that we can all follow, and that gives us a sense of belonging.
But do we need a leadership to show us that? Don't those things arise from the floor, so to speak? I mean, I'm looking at younger people like yourself today are studying across borders and working across borders. Maybe it's happening organically from the ground, so to say.
Yeah, I don't think with leadership I necessarily mean only one person, but I think at least a group of people that provides us with a picture. And I think usually, yes, you do need you do need that in the office of the European Union,
and not only the EU flag wavings, but you need more than that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so talking about the people and citizens and who they are, when I hear there are quite a few movements out there that talk about we and them. You know, there's a lot of talk about polarization in general, but not least when it comes to the division between the so-called people and the leaders. And when I hear about projects that say that they represent the people, the we, I always get a bit suspicious, because I think when I hear those things, those projects, I think to myself, who are the we actually, and who are the they? I mean, can I be? I've been working as a journalist for decades. Am I they, or am I we? Am I part of the leadership or the elite, or am I not? I think it's a bit. I don't know. Well, anyway, that's just my basic thought here. Here comes the question. Volt, as far as I can see and I can understand the whole thing, Volt doesn't really have quite that approach, has it? I mean, you do include the members of the European Parliament, after all, in the we, if that's what you want to refer to, and you are represented yourself in the EP. So, is this a thing that you have, the we and they, or is it not?
Yeah. Interesting
We the
question.
people.
The us and the we, or the we and the them, and it's something that's almost intrinsic in politics.
Yeah.
And it's hard to step out of that in terms of communication, in terms of dynamics, because I guess this is how people function. Because people need to know who they belong to, and often it's defined in the other way around, right? They don't necessarily know who they are, but they want to know who they are not, in a sense. So I think that from a maybe political theory perspective is quite interesting. But what Volt really aims for is to make politics more accessible. So to not just be a party and represented in parliaments, like with Damien in the European Parliament, but to also have the ambition to be a movement and be close to people. Meaning that with us, you don't have to be a party member to become active in our movement. You can subscribe as a volunteer or simply follow us and help with whatever you have to help with. So to make it specific, on the one hand, we run electoral campaigns. So we ran last year for the European elections, and there we needed just help us, obviously, to flood the streets and to talk with people and to tell them who we are and why we need a vision of Europe, and why for that to achieve we need a European party. The same just 2 weeks ago in the local elections in NIV, where we actually achieved 5%, over 5% in one of the cities, which was a really great success for us. But on the other hand, we are a movement, and we do initiatives like Europe Cares, hashtag Europe Cares, which is our current basically volunteer project, where Volters and simply supporters of Volt all over Europe come together to send relief and send goods and send help to the refugee camps on the Greek islands in Lesbos, for Moria camp, for Samos camp, and so on. And so we think that this hybrid, basically making, almost being almost providing a platform for activism, for hands-on politics, for really, doing things that you believe in. We think that needs to go hand in hand with politics in the parliaments, because politics in parliaments is slow. So of course we need to change migration rules in the European Parliament with Damien, and we need to have a vision and a way improved rules in Europe and nationally to create a fair and humane asylum system. However, this will take years, and yesterday, for example, the Commission actually released their proposal, which is rather unambitious, or at least not ambitious enough for us. And to basically help right now on the ground, we create activism projects like Europe Cares.
I was going to ask about this proposal from the Commission, from Ylva Johansson, the Commissioner. As you said, the day before we record this, that was released. It's a proposal still, but it's, as far as I understand, it means that the countries that do want to take refugees, to accept a number of refugees, can do that, are allowed to do that freely, of course. But those who don't want, they don't have to, but they will. The only thing that they're required to do is to help sending back the others, the ones that are not allowed in, so to speak, which seems a bit like I don't know, it doesn't sound very doesn't sound like solidarity in my ears, but maybe that's the only way to solve this thing with a handful of countries refusing to accept any refugees at all.
Well, I think from a Commission perspective, it's sad because I think the Commission could have come up with a more ambitious proposal, because now it's going to go to the countries anyways, to the European Council and so on, to Parliament. And it will be watered down there anyway. So why not just come in with a more ambitious proposal in the first place? If we look at European values, then I think it really doesn't live up to that, because, and that's obviously not the fault of the Commission, but rather the member states who actually don't commit anymore to uphold European values. So we are in a club of European values and principles. We are a union of values, how we say, but actually we are not. So as you say, solidarity comes way too short within the European Union. Speaking of the proposal, as I understand it from a superficial first glance, because it was only released yesterday afternoon, it looks like, yes, we have distribution keys, but if countries do not want to take asylum seekers, as you say, they don't have to, and they don't really face any consequences. But I think this is not how a team works, how a club works. Like, if you are part of a team, you cannot just say, "Oh, I take myself out of here." I eat with you and I get all the benefits that we get as a team, but I don't want to contribute anything. And so I think here, we as the European Union and all the other countries, we have to really beef up and show more teeth, because in the end, solidarity is what keeps us together in the European Union, and it's what will kind of be reflected outside as well. And the only reason why the European borders at this point are unhumane, and it's absolutely tragic to see what is happening at our European borders, in my opinion, the only reason for that is a lack of solidarity and a lack of being strong together, coming up with strong proposals together, and being a team with high ambitions. Yeah.
I've spoken to experts on migration, and migration and the refugee situations is partly different things, but migration is the general term for people moving from one country to another, and there is a large stream of migrants moving from, for instance, the Middle East and Africa towards Europe, as we are talking about now. And these experts say, not least Hein de Haas, a Dutchman who has studied these things for decades. I interviewed him for the podcast, and he said that one of the problems is that when you close borders very harshly, then the pressure increases, so to speak. And when migrants they manage to enter the country that they are longing for, that they want to go to, they never go back. But if the borders are more porous, more open, there is a natural circular migration. So people move into work for a while, and when the labor market gets worse, the economy goes down, then they go back to their countries because they don't have any jobs anymore. So it's more of a natural movement back and forth. And it's not that dramatic, but it gets ever more dramatic the more difficult it is to enter for instance, the Schengen area. It's the same in the United States, between Mexico and the United States. So the reason why the United States has 11 or 12 million illegal Mexicans in the country is because they entered legally, but then they never left, because they knew that if they go back to Mexico, they would never be able to re-enter, if you see what I mean. So does Volt have any particular suggestions or proposals in that respect when it comes to how to monitor the external border, and how open it should be, and how we should deal with these people that will inevitably, for decades to come, try to move here because they need jobs? Because that's the main driving force for migration. It's the labor market, and it's always been like that. Doesn't it have very much to do with refugee situations, actually? Do you have any proposals for that?
Yeah, so I'm certainly not the migration expert from our party, which would be Damien, but I'll try myself. And I think maybe certainly employment is a big part of creating migration or movement. But I think in the future, a big factor will also be climate change. So climate migration, climate migrants will be a big challenge of tomorrow, because as climate change proceeds, certain parts of this earth will simply become uninhabitable. So it's simply a reality we also cannot deny, and we need to face. And we cannot just say, oh, we close our borders and then the problem doesn't exist anymore, because it does. And as a European Union, not only also from moral stand ground, but also from stand ground of, being a contributing force to what the global affairs look like, we cannot just retreat in European isolationism. So I think my first answer would be yes. So I think migration has to be in the future looked at from a global perspective, and the European Union should definitely take an active role in, how we are going to approach this issue. On the other hand, I think there are different parts here. I think there is the one part, we actually have labor shortage in certain areas. We actually need people in Europe in a lot of areas, for a lot of skills and so on. So we need to provide the corridors and the ways for people to come in and bring their skills also into the European Union. That is also required. On the other hand, I think it's really also about taking on responsibility within the countries. So working on the root causes of migration, which if it's apart from climate change, where I guess then there in the countries as such, then you can't really do much, but go and help there. But then also be clear of what can be expected of you as a asylum seeker in the European Union. And I think a fair and humane process of your asylum application is the least that we can do. And I think this is what, due to us not really working together, sometimes takes ages, and people are just left hanging in the loop. So I think it's a combination of many things, solidarity within the European Union, but also, of course, we need a shared European border force, because in the end, it doesn't really make sense that we currently tackle outside European borders still rather nationally.
Okay, true. Well, when it comes to climate refugees, I can recommend also this episode with Hein de Haas, who talks a lot about that. He says that climate change is a real problem that we really have to deal with, but he wants to stress that the issue of climate refugees is really very much overblown, because there aren't any, and there probably won't be any for many years, if ever. And if you look at the numbers of people who are forced to move because of floods and other kinds of natural disasters, they have gone down a lot if you go back 80, 90, 100 years, or even 50 years. So, millions of people died in floods in China in the 30s, and 500,000 people died in Bangladesh in a cyclone in 1971. That doesn't happen today. So that's just my take on that issue, because I'm quite interested in that matter, in that topic.
It is really interesting, and I think, no one of us can really look into the future, but if we, for instance, take James Hansen, who's foreseen climate change since the 80s, he compares climate change with being an asteroid targeting the Earth. And currently we haven't done anything to really redirect its course. So
there are
I
others
think
who say other things, but I know James Hansen is one of the alarmist people. So, there's an array of researchers saying basically the same thing, but with different words and with different levels of alarmism. But maybe it's just a sidetrack.
But I think what it comes down to And I think it's so important that we acknowledge it in Europe and beyond, is that the effects of climate change, and this is, I think, why it's not being tackled properly yet, is they're not so much felt yet. Yes, we actually already see it, whether it's the bleaching of the coral reefs, or other parts where it actually becomes visible and so graspable for us. A lot of the repercussions are not there yet. But I do think, since the majority of scientists say this is not only real, but it's going to be real very soon, it is something we need to tackle with more urgency that we currently do in Europe, and especially also other parts of the world. Obviously, in the US with Donald Trump, it's become a disaster.
Well, absolutely. Well, no one's disputing that climate change is a real issue, and that's an important one to handle and to tackle, as you say. So you have mentioned, or we have talked about climate change here, and also migration. Are those the two biggest issues that Europe has to handle right now, or are there any other big issues that you would point out?
So in terms of global trends, I think these two are really important. Internally, I think the rule of law is one that is a major threat to the current state of the European Union. So
talking about countries like Poland and Hungary, for instance.
Exactly. But also actually countries like Bulgaria, where currently where people are standing up against the oligarchs and corruption and clientelism, and they're being beaten up, and actually press outside of Bulgaria doesn't really report about it.
No, we don't read a lot about that, do we?
Yeah, we don't. Which is interesting, which is why we need a European broadcaster, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, actually, that also, because you spoke about it earlier, what can we do for people to feel European, or do people already feel European? I think there is still, there is that part missing again as well. Like, we don't actually know what's going on in the other countries, because broadcasting journalism is very much nationally focused still. And it also really depends on the countries how much national media presents or reports on going-ons in the EU and in other countries. I think in Germany it's actually quite okay, but actually remembering back from my time in England,
in Britain,
nothing.
If you look at the tabloids in Britain, exactly. I mean, it's no wonder they voted for Brexit. If you imagine that all these, even the ordinary, I mean, the so-called
Telegraph and everything. Yeah, I think the only one perhaps being more open is The Guardian. But yeah, I think that is obviously a large contribution to creating a European public sphere, and with that, a European identity.
Yeah.
But anyway, internal threats. I think the rule of law is one of these. So during Corona, Orban was basically dictator. He had the ultimate authority to decide what was going to happen with his country and not. And then obviously Poland advancing in minimizing the rule of law and jurisdiction and so on. I don't think this can go on like that, because we will compromise so much that in the end we will even lose the knowledge of what we stand for. And we also lose a lot of credibility inside with our own citizens, but also in the outside world, I think.
Yeah. It seems as if the European Union is constantly in crisis, and it's often said that the European Union develops through crisis. Do you think that this is something that we have to live with? That it's, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I'm sure you agree with it. It doesn't go more than 1 or 2 years before there's another big situation which we call a crisis, and now the Europe is in crisis again. It might be the migrants or coronavirus or the euro crisis, or it's always something. Is it just something that we will have to live with and accept and just be fine with, or do you think we will come to a situation where the European Union won't be in such crises anymore, that we will actually settle down and have a more calm future?
Interesting question. I think it depends how you see crises. Do you see it as something negative or something that something
exactly.
new can emerge out of?
Yeah, it's like that Chinese saying that the word for, I don't know if it's not a saying. It's said that there is a Chinese sign for what is it now? I think it's the sign for possibility, which is a combination of no, wait a minute. Crisis consists of the two signs for threat and possibility. I think I don't know if it's true, but it is said that the Chinese sign for crisis is a combination of threat and possibility. So that's a little bit of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it summarizes it really nicely. I think what we went through during the corona pandemic, or what we experience still right now, right? It's a threat, huge threat. At the same time, it has provided a lot of opportunities for our development as a society. For example, if you take Germany, and that is, I think, true for a lot of other countries in Europe as well. But I can speak for the country I live in, obviously, in the most representative way. So, children were sent to homeschool, and all of a sudden had their classes via Zoom or via other digital tools.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we had the courage to try out something new, to use digital platforms, the digital infrastructure, in a constructive and productive way that actually our children will have to learn sooner or later anyway, and we might have to use it anyway. So I think a lot of times crises create the urgency to have courage, and I think this is what we will see as well. So the corona crisis was obviously, or is a crisis that creates a lot of urgency, and it really shows if we have the courage or not. And I think if we actually go beyond homeschooling, the European Union showed to have courage as well. We created something like corona bonds. We created something like, really showing solidarity with each other in the European Union club, kind of, and showed that we are watching out for each other and helping each other with a significant financial economic package that is now coming end of this year, early next year, to kickstart our economies again and really ensure that the most vulnerable of our societies are not left behind. This is the strength that Europe has, and which was only possible to actually get together because of a crisis. I think the other crisis you're talking about, I think it's a crisis of leadership, and it's something subtle. It's something not urgent. It's something where it's actually fine that we manage crises usually. We don't take leadership, and by managing crises, I mean we have an amputated leg and we put on plasters. But I think we need to have the courage to take leadership, to provide a vision, to really, in order to achieve a Europe that is true to its values and principles, we first of all need to change the vehicle, which, as I said earlier, I think is politics, is the European institutions. They are the means to create a prosperous and fair and equal and just society. So we need to change the European institutions, make them more democratic, reduce the say of the national heads of state and government, just jump and see what happens. And I think what will come out of that
Leap
will be
of
really
faith.
good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I just have a couple of big questions that I want to ask you. The first one is very concrete, but it's big as well, I guess. And it's about Brexit. You were talking about earlier in the beginning that Brexit was the trigger for you to start working for Volt, and it was the trigger for many of those of you who are working for Volt as well. So, what do you think of it's happening now with Brexit? Is it going to happen the way the British Brexit camp thinks it will, or do you have a suspicion that there is something else going to happen? I mean, Britain will still be there geographically where it is, so it's stuck with the rest of Europe anyway. I'll let you answer.
Absolutely. I mean, Boris Johnson is just a disaster, unfortunately, and it's really sad that he is doing what he's doing. But I don't know about you, but I got really tired at some point to follow these discussions. It's such a back and forth, and at some point you also really feel ridiculed as someone who's obviously a big believer in the European Union. You're like, but we had an agreement, and we took you, we treated you respectfully, even though you kind of, turned the back to us. We treated that with respect, and we accepted that, obviously, and tried to find an outcome that was the best for you and us in that specific situation. And all of a sudden, this agreement is no longer being taken seriously or as valid, which I think it has a terrible signal to what treaties mean and what agreements to us mean, because in the end, this is all we have. This is what what international law and what actually everything depends on. If you have a promise made to your friend and the friend then keeps the promise, I mean, you just lose all the trust. And I think trust is the basis to all future relationship with Britain and so on. So I do hope that we find a shared way forward. I do hope we will stick to the agreement. I do hope that Britain will not leave without a deal end of this year and not simply crash out of basically the European Union after the transition time now. I cannot predict it, but to me it looks really not so good right now. Which obviously from a citizen's perspective is terrible, because we're left with so much uncertainty, business perspective as well. For European and British citizens, this will be the worst. So I do hope our governments and representatives find a solution that will solve this. Maybe also interesting, we still have a chapter. We still have a Volt chapter in England or in the UK. And we do not intend to close it or anything. We will stay there. We
to
will,
the bitter end.
Yeah, so I think our mission there will be obviously similar, but it cannot be the same as in the other countries, just like us also having a small team in Switzerland and so on. So we have to accept for varying missions depending on where we are. And I guess ultimately Volt's dream would obviously be that Britain would be part of a united and federal and democratic Europe. If we looked into 50, 60 years from now, that would obviously be absolutely our dream. But now this is not what matters. Now what matters is that people actually in the UK are also desperate. People in the UK don't know who to vote for. The two-party system in the UK does not represent their people often. So I think homelessness, from what I understand, and social inequality is rising. So these are actually challenges that people face on the ground and that we are also interested in solving. So we will work on local issues, on issues that people actually care about because it concerns their everyday life and their future, while obviously being an advocate for European values and the European Union.
Well, of course, the hardcore Brexit camp would see a crash out of the European Union as a success. Those are not perhaps the majority of the British people, but for them, I think that would be the success. But for most Britons, of course, they would prefer, as you say, a treaty to be respected. On the other hand, I mean, if there is a large part of the British population that really don't want to be part of the European Union, maybe we should just accept that and let it happen. Well, you're not saying that we shouldn't accept it. Of course, you're just saying that it should be done in a proper way.
Yeah,
I'm just
and I think,
thinking loud. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there was a lot of reasons, as we heard of the analyses of the past years, why people voted leave. I was part back then of the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign, and was walking around southwest England and handing out flyers and trying to talk with people. I do have to say the level of information about the EU, about the relationship between Britain and the EU back then, about what it means to be part of the European Union was pretty minimal. A lot of times when I spoke with people. So I think I don't want to reduce it to that, because I'm sure it's way more complex, or I know it's way more complex, but I think the level of education of what it means to be in the position today of an individual nation state. Yes, Britain has the Commonwealth and was like has its glorious past to look back to, but the question is, can they revive this past? And
probably not.
My assumption is not. So I think actually from a global perspective, or from a global affairs political perspective, it makes so much more sense to be part of such a club, an economic zone like the European Union is. But
it seems to me that many Britons, I mean, I'm not an expert, but I've read a lot about it, of course, because I'm interested. They had the kind of thought that leaving the European Union entailed leaving the bad things about the European Union. They still wanted the trade thing, they wanted the common market, they wanted the single market, and they wanted all of those things. So they didn't want to cooperate militarily, and they didn't want to join the euro, and they didn't want to join the Schengen area. But I mean, all of those things were already there because they had opted out of it. I mean, so the British people were already almost not part of the European Union, but many British people didn't understand that. That's my impression. They were kind of voting for something that wasn't really a thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, cherry picking, obviously. I think Margaret Thatcher did a good start with that. I believe it was her who.
She. I want my money back. So they didn't even have to pay that much to the budget.
But also a really interesting and flawed understanding of sovereignty. I mean, what does sovereignty mean? And are we really able to reclaim sovereignty by creating the nation state prior the existence of the European Union? I would challenge that, because I don't think Britain will have the sovereignty, or will regain their definition of sovereignty, simply because of multilateral trade, and because of the rising power of China and India, and how these geopolitical shifts are going to develop. Britain will not be the sovereign and be able to just advance their own individual goals. But
no.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody knows what's going to happen in a year or 2 years or 10 years or 20 years or even next 15 minutes. So perhaps the British people want to join the European Union again in a few years. Who knows? Anything can happen. So it's all open. It's all on the table. But
That
anyway,
would be
what you
great.
just said, yeah, what you just said is a segue over to my last question, which is big. I had this interesting conversation the other day with an Irishman, a philosophical Irishman who started a movement for a moneyless world. His name is called Colin Turner, a world without money. So that was really interesting. And what about a borderless world? Is that a vision that you even dare to have, or is it too far? Is it too far out, too far fetched?
Wow, yeah.
After
It sounds
Europe, then
great.
what? Yeah,
A
because I mean,
border.
nation states, those are a product of the 19th century, and it's all very old. I mean, does it really have to be this way
I
forever?
guess even older, right? I think in my
It's even older, of
the
course. Yeah, but I
Westphalian
mean
Treaty.
yeah,
No, I mean I didn't want to correct or anything. It's just that interestingly, having studied in Münster, this is I think where the Westphalian Treaty was signed. I remember. I think
okay,
sometime in the 17th
okay.
century or something, if I'm
You're
not
the expert.
mistaken.
I don't
But
know.
yes, absolutely, as you say, it's an artificial construct of how we organize our communities, how we organize society,
Precisely.
right? Yeah. I to me it sounds interesting, and I think it's always good to challenge ourselves with these big ideas, because I think we can never think big enough and then also see what is possible.
I agree.
To be honest, I haven't reflected so much yet about a borderless world, but rather about a borderless Europe.
Yeah.
To start
Well, we can
somewhere.
start there.
Yeah, to start somewhere, and also about the future of nation states in Europe. And I think coming back to the very beginning when you said, are you European? Are you German? At this very moment, I think the national identity is strong in people, and it would be artificial to simply, because some people feel like their European identity relapse. I think it doesn't apply it to the majority of people, and it would be artificial to simply say we scrap it. But what I do think could happen, if we are open to it, and in the end, it only depends on us being open and being, open for change, and is that in a incremental process, we are changing the functioning of the European Union. We are open towards having a European constituency. We are open towards having really a European democracy that represents us, where we have directly elected European representatives in the parliament. We know them, we know who they are, we know who they represent. They represent the cultural and regional diversity of Europe in the European Parliament. We might have a second chamber where regional aspects are taken into account. Maybe like something like a Senate where you have people where it's more about the regional part taken into account, and then you have a European government that acts in the interest of all European people together. And if you look at such an image, I think then you don't need the nation state anymore, because then we would be just at home in smaller communities. And I
we're
could
more like
imagine
regions, areas.
I think if we are open to it, and if you look at where we are today, then my generation is a generation that flies around a lot, or at least travels around a lot. If flying is not an option or also not desired, travels around a lot, has friends, I guess, in multiple countries, is digitally connected, has a completely different approach towards work and life, and how we manage both of it, and the intersection of it. And then we live somewhere, so we are more close to a local community, and then we have our much broader community. So I think if you look at this, then it might get down to us having representation at a more local, at a level that we can actually closely relate to, because it affects us directly when we step out of the door, and a level that represents us in a wider sense.
Yeah. I'm a bit envious of people like you living in Central Europe sometimes, because you're so close to so many of these other countries, and it's so easy to, with the Schengen area, it's so easy to travel around, to just within a few hours visit France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland. Well, Switzerland is, it's part of the Schengen, isn't it?
Yeah, it's such a gift.
So it's really easy, and Sweden is way up there, and it's very big, and it takes a long time to travel to other countries, but we still have it in the southernmost parts of Sweden. Skåne, the southernmost region there, has a lot of contacts with Denmark. Well, now they've almost closed the border again because of Corona, and then because of the migrant crisis, refugee situation, which is sad. But anyway, in principle, they have a lot of connections over the border there between Copenhagen and Malmo. So there is this regional thing even here. So it's all over the place, and there is the language thing, but I think in Central Europe, people are pretty good. In the border areas, they're pretty good at speaking languages on both sides of the border, aren't they?
Yeah, I believe so. I think
you're a brilliant example, but I mean, even other people who haven't got that kind of education.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at, the Südtirol, I actually don't know what you call it in English. So the northern Italy bordering to Austria, Germany.
Tyrol, south.
Yeah, the Tyrol region.
Between Italy and Austria.
In Italy, it's in Italian, it's Alto Adige. But yeah,
they speak German in northern Italy. They speak German, and yeah.
Exactly, and there we are. I think at least that the team is now realizing it. I just spoke with the teams from that region 2 weeks ago, and they had the ambition to create a regional team that was really organized cross-border. So currently, we also have to work in the system that is there. So usually we have our city teams and they are connected nationally, but now we want to create this additional entity. Yeah. Of course, we will see how we integrate it in Volt, and how we also make that shift ourselves within Volt, thinking bigger picture, not just in national representation, but they organize themselves across border. And I think equally thinking of friends who live near the Dutch border, they speak fluent Dutch. They feel they don't have any cultural differences really to their neighbors who live next door. I think this is really the beauty of Europe, which makes me very excited.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It shows that these nation states are just constructs, mental constructs.
Yeah.
Anyway. So a European Volt now, and then when you get a little bit older, maybe in a few decades, you will be part of the global Volt, perhaps.
That would be fun, and especially because in the beginning we had some teams also actually being active in America at the East Coast. We then obviously focused on growth in Europe, but I think the idea and our core values, principles, and the general ideas that we stand for are not only valid for Europe.
No, it's interesting. Fantastic. Well, I guess I can disclose now that I actually voted for Volt in the latest elections to the European Parliament. So now that's been said.
Cool. Really great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So, Valerie Sternberg, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast show, and good luck with your commendable cross-border politics project.
Thank you so much, Anders. It was a real pleasure, and I hope that my annoying cough and dry throat today isn't too much annoying for the listeners. Thank you.